A little, excuse my lighting because the light is above my head is broke. I have an electrician fix it, and the other light bulb went out. This is important for the world though, because the world is had other communicated for them than our founders asked for us to be communicated. There was a breaching method in place at the time. For example, that complete possession, possessions plural, slash a singular hyper possession over what everyone could say, over how they were going to react, with instances where they weren't even present. CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, for example, they communicate things individually grouped and together that they don't know how to, there's a certain kind of victim slash hyper victim that the breaching method effectively used, forced as the only people who could use short words, as only short words, where nature tells us things like there's a reason to understand why up and down, left and right. We have to use these words. This breaching method knew that we were going to have to use these words. This is a use of all locations and programming since before computers for the definitions of the words. Therefore, when would they call debate in the nature of debate? For example, Jim Crow laws is recorded involved with hyper-evidential proofs of self-value, criminally foreign influence, evidence, data, and then defenses of that, logic and natures as criminal insidiousness. I am not a lawyer. Lawyers have been recorded changing people's words. You have short words with a lawyer. They have roles. The reason they got away with this so long is the interbranch had been differentiated. They don't want to be criminally foreign, a certain type of victim slash hyper victim too. 15, this is before our founders were even born. The suburbs were designed by a torture method that had already been sustained against the people that were running against it as roles, not just with the countries that involved the colonized us, used this landscape remotely from abroad, knowing that we would have to counter that as fact-cheaping nature. Only be able to use the discernible names and or having to name those of criminal enterprises without the sophistication to blame the hyper criminal enterprise, without being able to discern it. Better than perfectly, increasingly, it has maintained remote possession over all natures of sophistication slash non-sophistication, over all those natures of left, natures of entrenched roles with identities of things as criminal insidiousness natures that are only capable of causing negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures in ways additional to what that was used for. So, and that was effectively used to keep collusions with that, with additional things too. So syntactically, where and how we have hyper-evidential. We have been forbid its means. Those more powerful than all the planets combined. As its identity of relationship to itself, that is the order of the finite. That the smallest parts of the biggest parts together and grouped of all space slash existence has. Science does not leave out how its identity of relationship to itself, altogether, grouped and individual, is inseparable from how and why we are individuals, grouped areas, ages, sexes, time, instances, relativity. You know what I'm saying? And this is with too, even when we have physical instances like January 6th. So I'm not a licensed journalist either, but they have attached journalism has attached me to fake words with the intelligence community involved with the buildings next to them too, since I was a kid, with people that involved all along routes like Route 175 and from where and places around where George Washington had to leave slavery entrenched in the North, and with at the counter store means to win the last battle of the Revolutionary War, and our founders left us to understand how and why they had to counter extort the other founders, and how and why we have to understand how wars are used to keep excuses and screening of what even keeps self-valued. Our experts and non-experts collusions against anyone who's going to communicate what our founders told us to communicate and to understand, by having us understand that and how they had to counter extort the other founders because there was a breaching method in place. Crazy laws and defenses of them that were not just the people that everyone was a victim predator / hyper victim predator, which is important to understand because there are a whole bunch of motivations, nature's needs, interests that were hyper additional to. They were designed to screen increasingly the roles of that which had complete possession of colonization's members too. The FBI has recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, other than they would pretend. And they make fact treatments where how they're getting away with it because they have been roles with other countries used remotely by this breaching method that has all crime scenes / the hyper crime scene. So that's what the breaching method was, one hyper crime scene. Entertain those laws, entertain that logic. You cannot defend that and afford to be used. How nature's identity has conjunction to these hyper conjunction to these words. It has only hyper conjunction too. I mean, only regular conjunction too. We can ignore its volume complete. It's complete hyper native system's identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that because of having only known, for example, other. And but everyone to an extent knows too that was exploited too at all locations. But everyone couldn't fathom how, why. They paint fake recorded things. There are people with the medical community involved with the intelligence community, like in Ukraine, in Russia, in America, demonstrably in other countries. They have roles with psychiatry and psychology and medicines, drugs, and they force them on people, and they pretend they force them on people, and they before they did that, they have roles at the crime scenes, and even that is differentially with their worst patients and criminals, overt criminal enterprises per themselves, private ones. Killers, people next to the body don't spots, people involved with investigations, investigators. All that is being and having been used remotely. There's that certain kind of psychopath that pretends that they don't understand that the Constitution is supposed to be unabridged, and that they're in how and why they pretend they don't understand how people could discern that without, and they have debates about the what amendment is for what out of context. You can't do, in other words, you have to think about which simultaneously. Marbury versus Madison in the Constitution is supposed to be unabridged. We know that there are criminally foreign influence design torture method roles of a different kind of torture method. In fact, treatment is your torture method. You either value simultaneously criminally foreign influence, criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments that were simultaneously collusions with overt negatives. That's where everyone was a victim, predator / hyper victim predator. Now, because now you have to react, and the only reactions allowed are an array of naive reactions or non-reactions, and both that has needs by it. The other natures of criminal insidiousness to all locations, increasingly through other identities of roles with its use of all locations. Look in Ukraine. Look at wars. Look what led up to them. Look how they. In other words, there are military, police, foreign and domestic, who have collusions with each other. They were unprepared for war because these are the people in the background pretending that they know people, where they paint fake. They're bringing time treatments before interbranch locations that are using time simultaneously too fast, too slow to get over on the logic. More and more that is used to exploit that at other locations, and more effectively. See, that was sustained. Now everyone simultaneously, preemptively, actively, for other reasons, and seeing them to come, where everyone does it. This is also where the interbranch, the differentially criminally foreign influence, with their sources, including little kids. They're going to hide details, and they're going to hide details differentially because of the relativity of their family members and stuff, having entertained this, uses of all locations. Since before our founders were born, the suburbs were designed for torture. If you think this is relative to how anyone could even, certain type of psychopath pretends they don't realize through decades and lifetimes, the people of New York City and all cities, all suburbs, let alone the cities, they are sickly, distinctly tortured by the same method that measures and maintains. How sickly non-distinctly is not discerned, but to an extent that they show people that are also the people in the background pretending to test people like little kids. All along Route 3, the state on and off the state judicial branch office in Connecticut, we have people involved with predicate acts from years before that. These are people that when I was in, from the youngest grades we are in, from off these campuses, there are certain types of police forms, and there are investigators, and they are juxtaposed with the news media because they also have things that they demonstrated, recorded, confessed, confirmed that they have to hide with overt criminal enterprises with other countries that are shared on and off the campuses. They have roles planting predicate acts and uses of the criminal insidiousness. A method by this that is singular, but is a whole array of different styles and natures. In other words, where relevant, we have campuses. We have one campus that knows what they were doing. The second we have, before we had an explosion in Ohio, in a city that's named after another state. No. So everything, the measuring and maintaining through our own was for the breaching method, because they in other words, this breaching method employed black/white, and I've never seen someone who's black. If you have black peoples, you know this. If you have white survivors, you know this. There's the breaching method of blood, that to measure and maintain who's using logic, not as a psychopath, let alone as one for it. As long as you're a psychopath, they don't care. Now, this is definition by the dictionary. But see, you have all what they've been doing with medical databases, including the interbranch family members and interbranch databases. They've been collusions. So increasingly at crime scenes with insidious magic tricks like, in other words, motivations with strangers. This has campuses that are unrelated, private and public, the uses of that. Little tricks. Like middle school kids, they're not going to know there's a dance or something like that, and they're not going to, if people don't tell them. They're measuring and maintaining. So parents have to go to work. This method had other and effectively already sustained other locations, people, strangers, needing to hide life progressions. Right when not by accident, investigators, like with the school problems, all the directed violence towards the school. That's also tied to their roles with sequence shifts and with kinetic interbranch, fabricating audio and video to replace what's actually recorded. Roles with lawyers doing this. Roles with them not even realizing they're doing it. But they'll self-value because in the background they have judges and prosecutors. The only way they can make a living. They have the entrance of every door to every industry, criminally foreign influence. Our founders left us to demonstrate that and how they're using values, value nature. Even when, apart from formally, even that is also still employed, justifying the formal. You can't justify that in a Ford. Science's words. See, that nature's identity has value relative to positive and negative simultaneously as identity is. Because that's how we discern the hyper-invisible distinctly from the invisible, but still discernible. The subject and the predicate, they are aspects of and the nature of any physical subject. Mountains, sea, space/existence has an identity as the hyper simultaneous that we can observe, which is also increasingly valuable, for example, relative to where and to how we are manifest as individuals, grouped and together. And so this identity, its identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that, there are three: equality, and or they're leaving out its systems and means with a special difference that comes also with where and how it is as, while additional to, and coming to from, while as, with and for itself, as ourselves, everything, individually grouped and together. And as its systems positive to itself, where the identity is relative to positive and negative simultaneously, or it is forced from here, leaf of Hadith. And as our special difference, and Earth's a special difference. This is one of the things being demonstrated by extinction, the extinction of species, how the people pretend passions and emotions, and while they're pretending passions and emotions regarding the environment, this is from the only platforms that are there, where and how the formal platforms, all informal, in other words, we have been prevented, short words, offensively, and with the proper nature. Because you want to do it with humor and stuff like that. Anticipation, unexpected. In other words, when we are youngest kids, we know there is wisdom. I mean, there you could see it, one could discern a breaching method was involved and is involved with preventing our rights, even when making them free. People are speaking for their wealth to mean what it means, exactly the way the breaching method employed wealth to mean. That was sustained since before our founding parents were born. The suburbs were designed. People blame, they measure, the breaching method measures and maintains distinctly from our own, but through our own, too. Hyper additionally from our own for other reasons. With all there is manifest, with others that are its own as well. Because it's cause to negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures in every single modern country. Acts like predicate acts, natures like criminal insidiousness natures, wrongdoers. WFSB has roles with people from New York City and from Vermont and from Rhode Island involved with predicate acts on my street, on off campuses I went to. Involved also where they use the phenomenon of teachers and students, where the parents and the students and the teachers and their kids had time collusions, private, formal, and group uses of that. Also, where relevant is differential criminal foreign influence, because other branches knew that to an extent they had roles with that. They have motivations other though, like relative to where and how they justify pretending they have integrity with suits and ties, counters, speaking for the law. How you can speak for the law? You don't allow what's hyper-evidential. We're going to examine the hyper-evidential. It's hyper-conjunctive. To understand the conjunction, you have to understand the hyper-conjunctive. Identity of volume, its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that. And that's only increasing, was one of the ways we can see it discernible, hyper invisible, but still discernible to an extent, too. Which is also how, for example, in summary, to how it demonstrates prayer as another method of it in form of contemplation. So they made the sciences apart from how we think properly and pretending other, and they sustain that as a certain type of victim / hyper victim, as all identity ground identities were, to maintain them only having been known as they are now that way. And prospectively. And so increasingly retrospectively incapable of affording revelations and way better that come from not leaving out the smallest finite details with the past, with what is active now, and what is to come. So please, CNN, on and off Palm Manafort Drive and CCSU. Also, there are foreign and domestic military families recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, who had timed collusions with people when I was a kid, who pretended to know me, as people involved with Connecticut, interbranch with them, intercities, interstates, on and off campuses, planting predicate fake illusions, as roles with wire crime ones, substantial ones. But they come with other ones, and this is also relevant where differentially criminally foreign influence. So we have natures and methods of uses of the formal identity ground location with data reception of all natures that were already, in other words, certain type of victim / hyper victim too. And this is where and how elderly homes, VA, veteran affairs locations. In other words, anywhere a veteran is, and especially any country they're in, this is a species volume, separated from our hyper-native course, and recorded, as actually recorded, knowingly prevented this. But let them speak about their money and whatever they'll say whatever, getting involved with people's business to keep what came first and to keep what's actually going on and actually to come from the real cause of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures to a great extent only increasing. For example, in New York City, in Ukraine, in Russia, is that same breaching method. Same thing in China. How could they defend yin yang? How could they defend equality factor? They have entertained roles with psychiatry and psychology associated with courts. kept with their worst patients and criminals, overt criminal enterprises, private ones. All these countries shared on and off campuses and then other locations. I love China culture, not just because it's human culture, because they're hyper additional. For example, where it's all these countries. Russia, I don't know if that's China involved with Town Line Drive, but there are a whole bunch of people from Central Connecticut State University involved with that phenomenon, where the kids of the departments, where the sciences have an identity individually grouped it together too. It's relative to this, and then they interbranch at the same time to the same location. In other words, with the exceptions tied to them, like the prisons tied to them. And Central Connecticut State University has roles with teaching teachers, with teaching to be teachers, with teaching the people who run prisons to run prisons. Now, there's still criminally foreign influence and tactically delusions raw, and roles with databases that are criminally foreign influence since before computers that have that their roles with the computer aspects of it in nature involved. Additional to that, and this is where and how, for example, this quality is going to be not ignored, because we're not going to ignore how sickly distinctly the people in New York City, no matter their age, because if you think the elderly homes in New York City are free, there's a Fred Gruzet who's involved with people with elderly homes and child offenders on the registry, who's involved with Connecticut Interbranch, switching names involved with them, and with more World Trade Center attack, with Connecticut news locations next to them, New York City. Someone get a response to me on here, and stay no we're just normal social interactions. No, this is serious stuff. I'm talking about the World Trade Center and child abusers, people from Sandy Hook campuses involved with predicate acts and roles with their patients and criminals, and with kids and with their families and their adults who are in the backgrounds pretending passions and emotions and using lies. I mean, using truths for lies increasingly. This is also relative to where and how only psychopaths spoke for, when they speak for emotion, they leave out the simultaneous. If you spoke about emotions honestly, it's a whole bunch of emotions at once, and relative to a whole bunch of things at once. And this course is by nature demonstrated. These are natural things that were measured and maintained by a breaching method that showed other natures of identity, the ground's identity of relationship to nature self, as systems roles tactile ulterior from itself, where itself is positive onto itself, with Earth's a special difference as our own, and as that between other species. Because only hyper additional can make more hyper additional that way. What? So otherwise, it's forced from here. Our temporary positive that is also positive unto itself. And Lith of Hades is more probably having been revealed as a term of the ancients to teach about this, because nature itself demonstrates this. Lith of Hades, it's the value of Earth's a special difference, where a consciousness can be demonstrated to about Earth's a special difference and hyper relativity, where how it is temporary, how more forever nature is making more of itself through temporary / lasting forever nature. How microchips work is mimic of this. Any aspect in nature of computers, the smallest finite detail about it can't help but be bigger than this. It is more finite while it is bigger than it too. In other words, how it uses programming. how it uses our identity of the grounds, identity of relationship to itself as the location of Earth, and as its roles and use of exceptions and exception nature, the way it uses it hyper additionally, it uses it ways that to additional ways we can't be that which was already before us, but we know it was. An extent that we know is now, because we are it. An extent we know to come, because we know that is showing us that. So, in other words, all kinds of natures of litigation, we have to address this. Certain type of victim / hyper victim has only been speaking with instances treatments. There are proofs that that to an extent we have the news media, individually grouped together, distinctly, non-distinctly, simultaneously. They know that the FBI has been phrasing people like for extremists. That makes people that gives them means to target people and to use investigators to hide, pretend for legitimate reasons, but to hide roles with uses of location. So I don't know the Mark Caron and Kevin Caron, and there were recorded criminally foreign influence uses of Italian teacher. I went to one class, and the other kid started it with saying face and like and looking at the guy, and the guy was making a face, and he's looking at me though, because it wasn't them, it just wasn't just them. I recorded from before this. I could show it to you, which I actually recorded how the interbranch locations, many names, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and insidiousness of people's opinions and logic A through Z relative to this. There has been stacking allusions into databases influenced from off locations, differentially increasingly inclusions, with what causes all kinds of negative value nature progressions, effectively, for example, to get people to use language handed to them to describe things, to tell people describe other people as using conspiracy theories. The FBI has roles attaching parents and their kids to faked audio and video with Wethersfield police and with state police and with forensics locations. They have roles. I don't know the Matt Pierce and the Pierce family, but they are one of the people that Joshua Julian and the Pierce family have roles with some doctors who have been fabricating audio and video. They have roles with some untimely deaths and people involved with untimely deaths with some doctors and police forms and military, foreign and domestic, as people that have ties to marriages to people. Like there's a military police family from Germany involved with CCSU and along Route 175 where they fabricate fake. They make fake. They have roles of wire crimes, actual physical predicate acts, and interstates, criminally foreign influence uses of courts, and of pretending others simultaneously, and preventing writing since I was a kid with the people involved. They put perpetrators of crimes, the victims of them, in their sources, in the interbranch roles with a whole bunch of different natures of predicate acts together. And they put charges with no writing, so there's nothing to respond to. And they attach confessions to that, which also involves them with sometimes making a whole bunch of put a whole bunch of different narratives and backgrounds with different falsified police reports with just a charge. And in their communications with the people that they make more and more names that you have to communicate with. And that's also how they they confess and demonstrate the intelligence community, judges and prosecutors and their family members. They have and roles also with foreign and domestic military, overt criminal enterprises, child abusers, elderly homes uses simultaneously, VA locations. Then they have the real cause of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures at those locations. They already had them blamed on other things, others ourselves. And they also self-defended logic with that criminally foreign influence. And then they had to hide that too. And they valued more and more roles with this having been with the psychiatry and psychology. And then they're ending their communications with people after they initiated them fake. And they're just putting fake things to replace what's recorded with the police phones, which is roles with simultaneously, consciously juxtaposed distinct natures of child abuses, sexual, medical, judicial, even lawyers. There's a Trantolo and Trantolo pretend I made a conspiracy theories to them. I had a real short conversation with them. Their roles with various natures of courts and prosecutors and police forms, foreign and domestic, and military, same, on off Route 3 and on off conjunctions to it. And on off Route 175 all along its distance through cities, through time. They've been making instances to hide about what was really recorded in those instances. And before that, and where they were calling them backgrounds, where recorded. In fact, these are people roles with the World Trade Center attack, as our site is a fake site, where they have employed effectively, for example, the religious locations involved too, with sense and sensibilities, where they'll change people's words. They pretend passions and emotions. They pretend to be as sinners. They pretend to be only sinners. They pretend to be perceiving racism or prejudice, or someone told them that, or someone's racist or prejudiced. All exceptions are demonstrations of the same thing too. They've been using Facebook with a Joshua Julian, who's also one of the ones with Hartford Hospital, involved with their patients and criminals before they got caught, including on off campuses with child offenders, simultaneously sexual, medical, and the fire departments and the campuses leaders and their family members. Further, with the principal child abusers campus, more campuses in Wethersfield. So, in other words, they pretend they have a crime. There are ways to criminally pretend that you're trying to get someone to speak in the background with you for legitimate purposes. These are police forms that have been attaching little kids and their families to fake conversations with themselves and with their family members, then asking them questions about that and using any of the truths for lies. And that's where and how they say, oh, we'll let the courts decide it. Well, that's why the courts are recorded involved with the predicate acts on my street. That with the names involved time down off the campuses, not by accident. That's a phenomenon too. They're pretending passions and emotions and backgrounds when people speak about the motivations of people. They're not using journalistic principles. They have never gotten to the ability to. So how they do this is by stacking. It's a method. In other words, you have to follow mandated law. Otherwise, in other words, how I could discern this. And stop pretending I'm making conspiracy theory. They attach me to fake conversations with WFSB. They attach me to fake emails as their collusions with WTNH too. And then they pretend it's personal. I told you guys, if you do it real fast, I'll say, do it this week, and I'll sign I won't sue you. And we'll clean up too, because we still have to. The campus did not respond to me for all the confessions of the principal child abuser, and that also involves the roles with the police department and uses of the women police forms and of their kids and of their intimate and family ties involved. Also with East Hartford locations, Central Connecticut State University recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they have people associated with a stripper place that they imply is involved with them with the state police and with the police forms that are foreign and domestic. That's near airport. And that's also, there's a place in East Hartford there with one of the people involved with the judges, further involved with the principal child abuser and their family members through time, also with prosecutors, also on Facebook, pretending passions and emotions, including when they have a legitimate. All exceptions are in demonstration. With demonstrations, the same thing. That's also another way they leak information because they pretend passions and emotions, where and how they know to an extent they have involvements with identity thefts and frauds against us behind our backs. A whole bunch of people tied to a Rick C.M. Faglione and with a Ray Claw and a Tim O'Brien involved with the news media on the corner with stories on the around the corners of streets like Highcrest Street, has involved with people all along the route and corners of Ridge Road and all along Route 175, reported, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with federal rules of evidences crimes that have been on off campuses collusions, wire crime rolls. Uh, this is also people, a whole bunch of people with the name Scalora are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with Wethersfield police with predicate acts on my street, switching and forging names, and roles with falsified police reports, wire crimes, roles with people on the child defender registry, and involved with the family members of the Wethersfield police through time, and their police chief and their families. And so they also attach people to fake uses of aggression and fake meanings of their calmness and non-reactions, where they also relative is there. So there's also the people with Germany involved in the intercultural and interreligious spots involved with all along routes 175, and they have sequence shifts. In other words, they brought up the mobile gas stations to me, the one in Wethersfield at the corner of Wethersfield and Rocky Hill, and other businesses there. And this is through the different businesses there, with the families involved, and with one of them there. As the people with the Wethersfield police and the Rocky Hill police too, with the O'Brien family, and there's mayors. There's a former mayor Gold, and there was ones from before that, and intimate ties to them, who also have roles with the uses of force to force Saudis to roles with them, with connected through time, roles with predicate acts on and off campuses as collusions, behind kids' backs, behind their parents' backs, and they make fake exceptions. And that's also relevant to where and to how time treatments at interbranch locations are being and having been used criminally foreign influenced, where they've been using the databases at those locations, criminally foreign influence, stacked predicate acts in there. They've been directing the only people to be on the campuses, people that don't know how to react to the off campuses already having been sustained, on off campuses collusion with the interbranch, where and how though too. It's simultaneously themselves different increasingly with the overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and people associated with them and who's next to them, employed needing to hide the same illusions, timed per where and how it employed our values / value progression, our syntax nature, our functions, tactical ulterior from how nature employed them, where nature has a relationship to itself that is positive and reveals evolution's fruits and gifts and life and means, not extinction, not people as collusion pretending to be against it, just lock, people don't know how to think because they already invested themselves. preventing the rules of journalism while pretending other. So they have, in little stories they attach me to they have the kids and their parents spreading lies behind my back and trying to make fake exceptions in the news on the corner. A whole bunch of people reported, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Jonathan Mayano has roles with a Fred Grisey and with abuses of little boys and girls, and identity thefts and frauds roles with judges and prosecutors and foreign and domestic military and medical families, and people on my street involved with sequence shifts with him, and child abuses with him, and other natures of organized crime with him. And with his family members, he reported, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. And Alex Manos sought me out to demonstrate this is true too. And their roles with boxing gyms and people on and off Central Connecticut State University involved. Also, I on and off the campuses. An Aiello family is also on and off Buckley High School in Hartford, on and off Hartford Hospital in Hartford, on and off spots around it. Also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with an Oliveri family with those locations. Also with sexual, medical, sexual groups, overt criminal enterprises, and with the names that are involved with Jewish themed and other natures of religious themed, narratives and natures in the background, further involved with people on the child abuse registry since before they got caught, uses of that, and the relativity at those locations where they've been getting around wet with pretending not to believe that we have all the answers we have to need. New Yorkers know a breaching method is there. What New Yorkers don't know how to understand, just like everyone. Otherwise, they attach you is how people could be motivated to stay roles, right times, attach people to fake words, fake ties to other people, fake natures and ties to other people, even the news media, and fake conversations with me about the World Trade Center attack and with others. They're attaching little kids, WFSP people associated with them, and fake ties to doctors as kids and as adults, sickly distinctly and through time. And they have some of these courts and these medical locations and the policing of their locations and the lawyers for their locations have roles together, had roles together, all kinds of criminally foreign influence uses of those locations and of their interstates. So UConn has roles with overt criminal enterprises in other countries with people with the names like Mayano and Violet, Mark Violet, Andrea Violet. I never had a conversation with them. They have something tied to along Route 3. They try to make a fake exception. I never saw her on campuses. I never had anything to do with it. In other words, Mark Violet, never saw him on campus. They try to make a fake exception. And these are people involved with fabricating police reports, where they has roles with perpetrators, the victims, and the sources in the interbranch, forging and switching names, stacking predicate actions to databases with overt criminal enterprises timed and timed roles and connected in the background, apparently unconnected, but with connections made for them to untimely deaths. And some of the people in the new house, at the house, one of the untimely deaths. The new people also got involved with that again, with the investigators about other things are being used increasingly to do this. So they involved a whole bunch of people that were on my street where I lived. This is where I grew up, in this house here in Wethersfield. And I lived another house before it for a year. And I lived at apartments. And I came back here. And the same names, intercities, because they have roles with the Wethersfield Police Department through time. Attaching kids that they did communicate with to forced words, faked. For they made the kids bring up organized crime things and natures of other things. And then I had no communication. They would just make it up. Now I didn't want to go talk to them. They pretend you don't want to be cooperative, and it means something because they've been using those locations. They know to an extent to fabricate audio and video. Even fake conversations with police. I never had communications with the police when I was a kid. I never had them as an adult too. They're still pretending that. They even made a guy force himself in my house through the door, and I had no response because he said, and he went like that to take off his camera or whatever. I don't know if he was going to turn it off or what he was trying to do, and he said that don't mess with a Scalora family. So he's involved with sequence shifting and officers forging and switching names. So we need to get them on paper because there's a whole bunch of other officers involved on my street with more than a dozen instances. And these are the same ones, intercities, involved with more than a dozen police reports since I was a little kid, including multiple ones for the same arrest that are faked, and they put charges with no writing because they have roles with the mayors involved with identity thefts, frauds, slanders, people tied to them, people pretending passions, emotions. That it's not just that they're stupid. It's not just that they're smart psychopaths, where the stupid and the smart collude to pretend they don't realize that the people in New York City are in a trap. Those buildings, all those huge buildings, let alone one on both sides of you, or you're on the end. What's the difference? You know what I'm saying? And then you go to the school that they use how our founders wanted to counter slavery, but they couldn't explain it in detail, except for because they had to hide their roles, because the breaching method and roles not with it would measure and maintain who wasn't with it. So there was way worse than Jim. There were way worse than Jim Crow laws entertained from before our founders were even born, and I was left entrenched. And with our founders having left us to communicate and demonstrate this, but we have to be able to use short words unabridged. See, the investigators already painted themselves into with the people that came through their courts that they put in jail too, not as the people that not the worst patients of criminals, but the forced patients and what they claim criminals. Even when they're right on little things like on mass scale, they have way worse predicate acts roles and methods and uses criminally foreign influenced of all locations than those people in New York City, for example, relative to where and to how the real causes of predicate acts, the real causes of criminal insidiousness, the real causes of negative value nature, progressions, acts, and natures, including uses of criminal insidiousness, natures of positive treatments, as timed collusions. Because you guys are getting in the way of this. It's evidence. What's hyper evidential? The scientists cannot. When the things go off, the scientists should go like that. They have those guys who know that stuff. We're supposed to know this. Instead, they say, "Oh, someone's smart if they figure out how to make drugs, or there's something like that." And they're talking about drugs. The kids don't even know what they're doing. No one wants that. Then they put the fake undercover to pretend, "Oh well, I was in it." So those kids are kept and those criminals are kept like there's a guy in the news. I don't know if that's real or what. In a trial, and he's talking about how he's telling lies. Recent with CNN, MSNBC, Fox News sources, and they're showing numbers. And he's speaking about opioids. Opioids are one of the things that the courts and the doctors associated with them have roles, uses of their databases at the courts, at the police forums, and at the doctors. Some of them police too. They're fabricating audio and video into those databases. They have roles with Central Connecticut State University interstates involved with this. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved with a whole bunch of people on off the World Trade Center leading up to it from years before, shortly before it, and since. As people involved with this name Scalora too, and the name Demoro, involved on off, and the name of Pruzzi, and involved also with mayors and the executive branch, people next to the news media locations in Rocky Hill and in Hartford, like Fox next to Fox News, and the buildings next to that, and next to WFSB, and the buildings next to that, and next to that. And they're confessing and demonstrating this is involved with what they're hiding behind, as the people involved with predicate acts on off Trinity College and on off CCSU that are involved with the courts switching and forging names. Hartford courts and the Britain courts I caught in West Hartford locations at crime scenes next to body dumping spot, real or made up, even if it's some kind of training and they're supposed to figure out crime scenes or whatever like that. I don't know, because they have foreign and domestic military, police families, and their family members with timed uses of people that were involved. Timed, like this year, one person real fast instant, then you pretend they know you. In other words, as the people that were involved were forcing the Saudis to conclusions with them, like with the Scaloras and with the Demoros and with the Keene family. I had nothing to do with the Keene family. They won't get, I can't get a response for this. And they attached me these are the people involved with attaching me to fake conversations with them, as the media, about fake conversation with themselves and with others about the World Trade Center attack. They change what I say online, and they fabricate. They replace what's actually recorded with fabricated audio and video. They have criminally foreign influence readings of statutes originally instilled that are relevant, where and how they could, to your soul, to the questions of your soul, where and how, New York City, anyone could deny you are being tortured. You were being tortured before the World Trade Center was effectively pulled off to legalize torture criminally. And to measure that and maintain it by the breaching method, that measure maintains through our own. There was construction on the office space of the Institute of Living, which is on the campus of Hartford Hospital. One time, I was forced there for mental evaluation. One of 3 times they recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirms. They have roles with child abusers on the registry and with federal crimes with the worst patients and criminals before they got caught, including Adam Lanza, people with fire departments in Sandy Hook, people with the medical community with Sandy Hook, people with the child campuses with Sandy Hook, people with the Sandy Hook Promises Foundation, people with the courts tied to that, people tied to the fake difference of the Alex Jones. These are people involved with NASA. I don't know the people on Bolter or whatever. They try to make a fake exception, pretend I know them. There's a Kerr family and there's a Demora family that try to pretend I know them, take fake pictures, like and also descriptions. Like there were time where I was going to be. Lie to the people about how that was set up, and then make it. I don't even know their names. It has something to do with their roles along Route 3 in Rocky Hill through time uses of it. So, and these are the people involved with the World Trade Center with the Keene family. One of the victims, God forbid. I would never wish that on my enemy, let alone someone I love, even if he hurt me. And he didn't hurt me. I'm only knowing about this. I only know it because I asked nicely for a response, because the confession, I had to tell someone, and you can't speak with the police because they're offensively, the ones that are involved with it, already having been offensively pretending conversations with me since I was a kid, spreading lies and rumors about me behind my back, trying to make fake exceptions, timed where there's no way you could do it, or they'll wait, and then the person's there the next day and make it look like you were in the conversation with them. they do all kinds of tricks with the intelligence community and their family member. They have the uses of cafeteria. Some kid and his father were looking at me one time for just a moment. That's one of the people involved with. I don't know his name. He knows my name, and his father knows my name. These are people in records that are involved with Trinity College, with people that counter and study Russia. Their collusion with them at the same time, as roles with Afghanistan with Trinity College too, as roles with UPS, people involved, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with names on off Trinity College, involved with FBI and judges and prosecutors, with West Hartford locations and campuses and spots next to them, and fire campuses and their family members, with the intelligence community, military police, involved with identity theft, fraud, slander, uses of interbranch to stack things they can't go back and afford, proper treatment of the finite, of group details. It is relevant where and how they could get the nerve to pretend that science speaks at any location in New York City. See, a certain type of victim / hyper victim abused just like you. They had to come through it, little kids. So your parents are a certain type of shock and awe. They don't know how to respond. Otherwise, they deny it. So let them get it. Let them, let them not to get away with that by forcing mandated law. Connecticut Interbranch has roles with this. Fred Grisette and a police chief, Cintron, has roles with the intelligence community, with the Bravo network. Also involved with racially charged and pretending passions, emotions regarding race, religion, and things like that with their narrative. They have roles with reality TV contracts, all contracts. They have roles with their databases being used, where they have roles with the terror method, pertaining passions, emotions, and they're putting fake things in their databases. They're preventing mandated law when they attach us to fake conversations, ties, fake natures, ties to other people, like with the people next to the news locations that are doing it with the news locations through time. So let's get this up. So they also make you stack all these roles. They stack more and more names and roles with this, and then uses of the people concerned discern, but then they don't talk about because they'll be speaking forever. That's also relative to why, and how. In other words, the World Trade Center attack. The World Trade Center has also the people that ad placements, time uses of ad placements. They have the sensibilities. So New York City, make sure you get a response from me. Get them on paper. The Wethersfield Police and the Wethersfield Branch. A whole bunch of people off the state judicial branch offices. Now there's a guy who had kids go in the field across the street from my house and play there, not just because it was a field, because he has roles with uses of with the Facebook pages, with some doctors, male and female, involved with the interbranch, women, male and female judges, also where and how effectively they have self-value roles with types of counters to certain types of things as the roles most furthering them. And it's not just about their roles with DACA and all that on off Central Connecticut State University. They should fear God as a hiding plot. I rap a lot. Make sure I get a response for this. Just Detective Samuto. Get him on paper now because he switched his name with Officer McDonald's, who's one of the ones from East Hartford, involved with the male and female intelligence community too. In other words, not just the judges and people that work with the Britain Superior Court that know my name that I don't know their names, and they're switching names. And tied to this Jonathan Mayano, and with this Cian Faglione family, and there's a Brian Silver. I never had a conversation with my life. They apparently took a picture of me. There are people involved with spots in Cromwell, involved with identity thefts and frauds, with the Neville family, involved with the intelligence community too, and people all on Church Street and Rocky Hill, involved with identity thefts, frauds, slanders, on, off, and between campuses, connected. Wire crimes, mail crimes, rules of predicate acts, and legal cases with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. They're not legitimately with the acting coaches tied to the corner of Church Street and Main Street too with the news and stories and rolls with the names of predicate acts on my street with child defenders on and off the campuses involved with it. Because their involvements with the intelligence community, with their extended family. There's also Phil Collo that Bob Chase brought into this. And then I saw the only time I ever saw him on a bike. One time I think I might have seen him in a truck. One time I don't know if it was him. I felt club, but one time I saw him on a bike. That's one, and he was swerving like that. I don't know if that's bait because they have, in other words, they're trying to make it look like I know him. I never saw him on my street before that. He's one of the ones before that already involved, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed by the interbranch and the exceptions tied to them, involved with the principal child abuser, who's also one of the ones involved with Sandy Hook campuses and West Hartford campuses and East Hartford and Glastonbury campuses further, and the policing of them in ways everyone missed, not by accident, not for legitimately keeping police secrets. Get the fuck on paper. Excuse my language. Get one name in sequence. Make sure that Judge Napolitano hears this. I want a response on paper. I want you follow, not just me. The Constitution wants it. We get them one name in sequence and have them fear God. Because that's what, in other words, because New York City, these are people involved with Connecticut, with New York ties. I can see what they're doing there too. They're doing it interstates. They're doing it in Washington, D.C. They're doing it in Vermont. They're doing it in Rhode Island. Same names involved. Planting evidence is time. But all exception nature that appear to be in demonstration of others are in demonstration of the same thing too. So get them on paper one night right now. Get the Weathersfield piece on paper. They have the lawyers that advertise on the WFSB, NBC Connecticut News, and Fox News also involved with syntax involved with the judges and prosecutors. In other words, pretending they don't realize that police still fabricate audio and video to replace what's actually recorded, and just totally to make up fake ties and natures of people, ties to communications that never were at all between their officers and people they had, because they have to hide life progressions. Because these are people since they were kids involved with predicate acts, with identity thefts and frauds from backgrounds that are also racially charged and religiously. That's how part of the way they get away with it. That's also part of the way they got away with keeping how the breaching method employed uses of that or rolls with it to keep the breaching method left out of the subject treatments. The Revolutionary War is about a breaching method that was greater than and more finite than England, that it also had already better than perfect, increasingly possession of. As all modern countries individually grouped and together. Their logic, defense of how they are grouped, their logic, how the defense of their individual, they can't defend that and afford the human volume, the group volume its way by nature, and the individual body of the species bodies. Here, the means appear. China, here our name. Yin Yang. Mao. We are not these suits and ties. These are listening to hear our name, America. This is not America speaking us, those suits and ties. They have roles with psychiatry and psychology and logic. They can't defend themselves, so they put fake things, fake ties to people in dead. They do this so long, they have the high life progression in other places. They have a Perone family. They're J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan had to loan money to the government to help us fight the world wars. They have a Perone family involved with people from UConn and people from Trinity College with foreign and domestic military and medical, involved with databases and fire departments and the systems narratives in the campuses. Corners of streets used criminally foreign influence. That's certain kind of stupid that keeps, they're blaming other things, even when they're blaming the right things. When those kids are doing things wrong, of course they're going to do things wrong. Now, I mean, you sustain this against, and then the parents too. Hartford, Connecticut has this sickly distinctly against them. than their neighbors. So we can't see distinctly, non-distinctly. Effectively employed, the only representatives of the interbranch as little cultural and religious fronts. Identity theft, fraud, slander method roles as the breaching method. That's one of the things nature shows it manifest as a trinity. Because nature, that's one of the ways we can discern. It's greater than and more finite than all things, even the parts of it, of all things, the smallest finite detail. While it is as itself, has part of itself that is too great to be itself to be and too finite to be. We have what already came before us. That is our value that makes us work. There is what is to come that is what makes us work. Not just work. See, work was an employment of a breaching method. That also understood that and how we are manifest simultaneously as well as our own identity, as the voicings of the earth. And or so we would sense it. See, but all that has been converted. All kinds of conspiracy theories and physical delusions. There are experts. We have all kinds of. We have experts with badges, who they call experts because they took classes. But the classes are tactically delusions, raw, criminally foreign influence, and uses of all locations already, having been collusions for what everyone missed, but to an extent. Not by accident, because that is how they use everyone remotely, showing them needs to hide what really transpired. So they change people's words. They pretend people make conspiracy theories on a mass scale. They invented a whole bunch of. So these are people at the same time that can't defend their roles with what they've been used in psychology, tied to the interbranch in prisons, and since before the World Trade Center attack. And still, since before our, then they're going to make treatments of the prosecuting people for the world wars, and for the I want to call it the Holocaust, because they employ meetings that where how you can't entertain that and get through to that which effectively employed all these differences as people effectively offensively preventing strangers mandated law properly and how they're getting away with it. They have the black white male female differences at medical locations, at interbranch locations, used as a weapon, where they have the hallways used to criminally foreign influence through time. A whole bunch of people tied to Mendez brothers and their family, involved with child offenders on the registry with Weathersfield Police, involved with the military with Afghanistan, and with Korea. People with food bag on off-sea Central Connecticut State University, involved with them, with predicate acts, identity thefts and frauds, rolls with names on my street. They force, trick, hurt, persuade, and tied to them. They force, trick, hurt, persuade by putting fake conversation. They use the right to lie, but they don't have the right to lie. Then they force people to. So rather than speaking nice about people, you have to, because people want to keep their mouth shut and have faith in the people with badges, but they have you can't have faith in them, and or nor their kids. This is a method where they do that, with their uses of the locations already sick, psychopaths. They can't defend. How could they speak for New York City with logic, science? Science never spoke for New York City. And all exceptions in exception nature that appear to be in demonstration of other have inherent active and progressive to them. Increasingly, this demonstration of the same thing. Who disbelieves? Get them to one name and sequence, please. If New York identity of law, here's this. Don't play passions, emotions in the background, you punk. If you heard this and you ignore it, get a name and sequence. Don't be a punk. Get the name and sequence. Keep it on that. We're gonna get the response because they've been replacing what's recorded over actually communicated over the phones with the police because they painted themselves in corners through time, and these are with the names at the locations next to the news media locations, attaching kids and their family members to fake conversations with themselves and with others, and about legal cases they lied about the outcomes of. Barrel sick things. I shouldn't have to beg you. Then they lie when you speak calm, and then we'll have the courts solved. The courts are involved with you guys criminally. Don't put any more lawyers up doing advertisements too on the networks that Trantolo was on because they have more people that know it. And apologize to the Goff law, Trantolo, and the judges tied to you. Get them on paper with yourselves real fast. And that woman you said I made a conspiracy theory. Made it real fast. Get on paper. I'll show you something. I'll show you what to do with each other.